Hi guys, my name is Matthew Schmidt. I'm an associate professor at the University of Florida, and today I'm really excited to lead this panel on a recently released book called Learner and User Experience Research, an introduction for the field of learning design and technology. You can download the book for free now. There's a link on the screen, and if you'd like to take a screenshot of this, just go ahead and you can then download it later. I created the book along with three colleagues, Andrew Tofik, Isa Yanka, and Yvonne Earnshaw. They're all going to be joining me in today's panel presentation, and of course, the other contributors were the chapter authors. So when we started down this path of creating this edited volume, our vision was to create an introductory resource with a focus specifically on the theory and practice of learner experience and user experience in the field of learning design and instructional design. Now, what predicated this was a premise that learning design cannot be adequately informed on the basis of theories and models that are derived from ed psych and learning sciences alone, but instead that learners' individual perceived experiences of interaction with learning technologies also must be considered as critically important to the learning process. So we recognize there was a need for a resource. We see that interest is growing in user experience and learner experience within our own field, but that there's a lack of guidance in our own field. If you want to apply these methods and processes, you have to look outside of our field. We recognize that user experience is core to many of our sister disciplines, such as human-computer interaction or information technology. However, historically within our own field, user experience has received little attention. That said, interest is increasing and use is absolutely increasing. Just take a look at the number of papers that are being published and take a look at the job market and the number of positions that are being announced that use the job title Learning Experience Designer, right? So there is clearly growing attention towards the hedonic aspects of learning design. That would be perceptions of satisfaction or having a pleasurable experience. Right? So it's not as if learning experience design is something that's on the horizon. It's something that is already here. But of course, because it's so new and it's just beginning to emerge within our field, there are a number of associated challenges with it. Now, in terms of the goals of this book, we had two overarching goals. On the one hand, we wanted to explicate the ontological and the epistemological underpinnings of user-centered design and user experience as applied within our field. And on the other hand, we wanted to foreground the importance of learning and learner experience as an emerging design paradigm within our field. So why don't we just dive right into the edited volume? The entire book consists of 16 book chapters that were developed in total by around 40 authors. We have published it using an open access model. It's published using a Creative Commons license, and that means that it is an open educational resource. And by virtue of being an open educational resource, people are granted 4 rights, or the 4 R's of OERs. You are able to reuse this, to rework it, or to revise it, to remix it, and to redistribute it. And you're able to do this freely without asking us for our permission, as long as you abide by the terms of the Creative Commons license. The book consists of 3 sections. The first section is Methods, Paradigms, and Theories of LX Design. The second section is Models and Design Frameworks for LX. And the third section is LX Design in Use. And we will be going through the chapters in each one of these sections moving forward. The entry point for the book is a chapter that focuses on methods. Entitled Methods of User-Centered Design and Evaluation for Learning Designers, this chapter was authored by the editors of this edited volume, yours truly, Yvonne Earnshaw, Andrew Tofik, and Isa Yanka. We, the authors, highlight the importance of not only referencing theory in learning design, but also of creating positive and enjoyable learner experiences. To this end, we situate our work in theories that are commonly associated with learning and instructional design and technology. We present with detail a broad range of methods and processes frequently used in user-centered design that can be productively applied in learning design and instructional design, such as personas, scenarios, prototyping, and usability testing. Helpful examples of how to apply these methods and processes in learning design contexts are provided, and our work contributes to our understanding of important theories at the intersection of human-computer interaction and learning design and instructional design, and helps to establish a repertoire of useful methods and processes to guide burgeoning learning designers who would like to engage in learner-centered design and research.
Another article to highlight in this edited volume is the article by Dr. Colin Gray entitled Paradigms of Knowledge Production and Human-Computer Interaction Towards a Framing for Learner Experience Design. In this article, there are multiple contributions. And what this article especially highlights is HCI as a discipline. This article extensively looks at HCI in the background of computer science, information science, human factors, and informatics. And what this article highlights is how human-computer interaction has been embodied and espoused within other disciplines. And so when it's introduced and brought forth from the perspective of a learning instructional design perspective, it's not as if it's a new thing that's being introduced. It's creating and looking at it from a more interdisciplinary perspective. And one of the quotes I think that's highlighted especially well is Dr. Gray notes that the interactions among the perspective is in many ways the greatest potential strength of HCI as a field. And what this article also does really well is then it transitions into the concept, into how to understand it from the perspective of instructional design. And they look at LID processes within human-computer interactions and UX methods and concepts. Not as if they're new, but as we look at the more evaluative components, looking at through these lenses. And the article, I think, especially its conclusion, will be really interesting to individuals. After looking through the history, after looking at in the role of learning instructional design and technology, he proffers a particular definition that may be helpful for others. Although it's really nuanced and there's a lot in there, some of the things that he highlights are the aesthetic experience, the acquisition and performance of knowledge in real-life authentic context, empowering the user learner while attending the impact on the larger, framing design as inherently situated. So in light of the history that he describes, he contextualizes it within a learning perspective. And beyond just looking about the usability or the aesthetics component, he talks about all these definitions and uses it as a way and as a catalyst for others to think about learning experience design in a meaningful way. How to go beyond just a simple evaluation component and think broadly about human-computer interaction and how to contextualize it within our field.
Chapter 3 has a title, Theories of Change in Learning Experience, LX Design, written by Bowen, Forssell, and Rosier. Chapter 3 gives us two important take-home messages. First, it reminds us of the crucial importance of connecting theory with LX design, evaluation, and design recommendations, but also B, it recommends us to connect LX with a learning impact. The authors connect theory at a meta level with LX methods and processes through the applications of theories of change. And second, recognizing the parallels between UX and LX, the authors highlight important distinctions between the two. Both are guided by theory, yet generally draw from different traditions. UX design is based on user research. LX design focuses on how people learn. Importantly, they also stress the necessity of testing underlying hypotheses to validate learning theories and UX factors that support specific design solutions. To illustrate how UX and LX is connected to a theory of change, the authors present 2 digital learning tools design cases that were guided by their theories of change. In summary, the chapter is an approachable confluence of theory and practice, and it provides an actionable framework for applying and testing theory as designerly practice. Happy reading, everyone! Chapter 4 has a title, Flow Theory and Learning Experience Design in Gamified Learning Environments, written by Scott Fan and Andrew Telfig. Chapter 4 acknowledges the vital role of theory in learning design, but cautions that privileging theory over considerations of learner experience design can lead to the emergence of unforeseen design flaws. The author therefore positioned flow theory as a means to describe underlying processes of learning and to take into account considerations of UX and LX. Following a brief introduction to flow theory, the authors describe how dimensions of flow theory might be linked to learning design. A review of prior studies that apply flow theory in gamified learning contexts is provided. Further, the authors describe the redesign of a gamified online course for university faculty to facilitate the understanding of flow theory in learning design practice. In summary, and as a result, design gamification elements are described and the authors make an explicit connection to flow theory while remaining the awareness of corresponding learning experiences. Happy reading, everyone!
This next chapter, Color Theory and Experience Design by Dr. Royce Kimmons, provides a really great overview of the use of color within design. Oftentimes, we look at design from a different perspective. We are working with clients who may pick out certain aspects of color and say, I like that one. But really, this is presenting color from the aspect of affect and its potential role in influencing intrinsic motivation. He goes into detail and provides an in-depth overview about the physics of light and color, and how color is digitally represented in terms of hue and saturation and brightness. He links the color theory to UX and LX by looking at those aspects of color that are influencing human emotion and really the psychological reasons to those various colors on the color wheel. He provides a lot of useful heuristics to guide selection and the use of color by specifically attending to contrast, attention, meaning, and harmony. I really appreciate this chapter because it provides a lot of information. It pulls from the literature about how color plays such an important role in design. Oftentimes we're working with clients about how to pick specific colors other than that color looks interesting to me or that stands out. This really goes into a lot of detail and provides a lot of visuals that show you the difference between contrast or what emotions may be evoked by different colors on the color wheel. So this chapter really stands apart as kind of an application of that visual design theory as it's applied to the LX design practice and how it contributes to our understanding of these diverse disciplines, contributing to LX, and provides just a really great visual perspective. This next chapter is entitled Socio-Technical Pedagogical Usability for Evaluating Learner Experience in Technology-Enhanced Learning Environments by Jonke, Schmidt, Pham, and Singh. In this chapter, the authors are stating that just considering technological usability evaluation is not enough. So looking at just the user interface and the user's ease of use, the efficiency, the error frequency and severity, and the user satisfaction is really insufficient to account for kind of the multiplicity of perspectives that learning designers must consider when they are seeking to perform usability research on learning technologies. Most of the research in the field really has looked at these applied methods from usability and UX research for evaluating and improving the LX from learning technologies. But the authors are arguing that they can't just consider the one dimension, that they also need to consider the pedagogical and social dimensions. So to operationalize this framework, the authors present a literature review of 13 articles since 2016 that provide the associated evaluation criteria. And based on these prior studies, they propose a conceptual framework that takes into account the social, the technical, and the pedagogical usability. So this diagram really illustrates the different intersections and the relationships of these three dimensions. The chapter goes into a lot of detail about these different dimensions and how they really come together. And then the chapter concludes with a set of design recommendations for hybrid and for online courses, which I find particularly useful.
Another chapter I'd like to highlight is called Learning Experience Design, Challenges for Novice Designers. And this article was written by Chang and Kawada. I feel like there are multiple contributions for this chapter. One of the things that they do early on in the chapter that I really appreciate is they talk about how learning experience design is a confluence of 4 factors. In it, they talk about learning experience, human-centeredness, goal orientation, and design. And not only do they describe this, they talk about the relevant theories and citations, seminal work related to each of these. And I appreciate this for a couple different reasons. The first thing that I really appreciate is they talk about the interdisciplinary nature of learning experience design. And again, they cite the relevant research and studies in support of these 4 confluence of these 4 different factors. And the second part, they approach it from a very interdisciplinary perspective. It's not just from learning sciences or educational psychology or instructional design. Well, they pull from human-computer interaction, they pull from computer science, and so on and so forth. The other part that I think readers will really appreciate is that then they contextualize it within expert novice studies about how learning experience design and design in general is really challenging. And we see a shift from novices all the way up to experts. And to support them, what they do is they provide this kind of comic approach to really be able to understand the learning experience design. The first one is a novice and how this individual maybe struggles to work with the subject matter expert to embody some of these principles in the confluence of 4 factors that they cited earlier. Whereas in the latter part, the expert really delves deep into some of these issues. And one of the things that I really appreciated when they were talking about the expert perspective is that the expert doesn't just do something in a very linear way. They're able to embrace some of the open-ended or the ill-structured nature of design, and they include the very iterative nature of this. And then towards the end, again, they circle back to this confluence of 4 factors, and they try to think, okay, if this is what learning experience design, what are the implications for how we can embrace it, as opposed to just looking at it from a learning theory perspective and a separate human-computer interaction perspective, and how we can think of these in tandems together as we support expert and novice designers. One of the articles I'd like to talk about is the role of needs assessment to validate contextual factors related to user experience design practices. And this chapter was written by Dr. Stefaniak and Sens. Some of the highlights from this chapter that I'd like to talk about are they took the idea of a needs assessment and they tried to rethink it through the lens of a user experience or a learner experience perspective. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting about this contribution, it took something that's so fundamental to instructional design that many instructional designers and practitioners, theorists would be able to understand. And it was a new take on an established process. But what's unique about this is that they also took a systems approach. So whereas a needs assessment or task analysis and associated processes would look at about how to make things as granular as possible, what these colleagues did is they looked at the importance of the contextual analysis to understand the learner's work practice. In addition, they also looked at the needs assessment to identify, classify, and validate learner needs relative to work-based practices. And as you read this chapter, you would notice a couple different things in the framework that they propose, as seen in the upper right-hand side. They look at a lot of different factors that's not normally looked at from a needs assessment or a task analysis perspective. Some of the things that you may see as they embrace this more systems approach are co-experience. And within that, they explore things like usability, functionality, fidelity. And as they branch out and as they explore that systems level perspective, they look at, of course, co-experience, but also pragmatism, empathy. And as you will read in the chapter, they also look about how to be able to translate this learner experience approach towards the idea of learner transfer and how to improve learning outcomes.
This next chapter is entitled The Design Implementation Framework, Guiding Principles for the Redesign of a Reading Comprehension Intelligent Tutoring System, written by McCarthy, Watanabe, and McNamara. In this chapter, the authors introduce us to the Design Implementation Framework, or DIF, as a means to guide the design and UX of their intelligent tutoring system, called the iStart, which is a game-based intelligent tutoring system for reading comprehension. They argue that balancing ease of use and enjoyment and efficacy in good intelligent tutoring system design can be achieved by applying the 5 cyclical phases of the DIF, which include defining and evaluating the problem, ideation, design and user experience, experimental evaluations, and feedback and implementation. They present a case study in which they illustrate the DIF in practice and highlight the variable nature of the process across various design contexts. They describe the methods and process that they use across each phase, and then how those adjustments should be made in accord with evolving design conditions. As the chapter progresses, the authors also underscore the importance of evaluation to the DIF for driving design changes. What I really appreciate this chapter is the implications for instructional designers. They not only discuss a well-articulated design framework, but they're also able to really enhance their approach through data decision making, which is arguably a skill for a superior designer.
Another chapter I'd like to discuss includes the chapter by Oprian and Balakrishnan. Their chapter is entitled From Engagement to User Experience, a Theoretical Perspective Towards Immersive Learning. And as we've noted in some of the other chapters, this notion of learning experience design has been very hard to define and very hard to know even what resources to be able to pull from, the literature, the seminal pieces, so on and so forth. One of the things that I really appreciate about what this chapter does and what these authors do is they try and contextualize user experience within the context of immersive technologies. What they do is they acknowledge that the learner experience is different when using different types of technologies, and then how to approach this as we try and embrace and espouse these different learning technologies. And so in doing so, they bring together a couple different things. They bring in immersive technologies, they cite the seminal research from user experience, and then they try and tie it to learning outcomes, most notably learning engagement, but also research related to some of the other ones. And so the chapter does a lot of different things that I think individuals will benefit from. First, they define the different modalities of immersive learning, including virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. They cite its origins, they cite where they're especially beneficial from a learning context, and then they talk about how to differentiate between the two as they go and explore this different research. One of the things that this article does and how it contributes uniquely to this perspective is that they provide a framework what they argue is unique to immersive learning technologies. So some of the literature that they cite are literature related to learner engagement, presence, embodiment, enjoyment, novelty. And all those can really be used to a lot of different learning technologies, mobile technologies, desktop technologies, what have you. They really try and talk about it and provide examples of how it can be used with some of these immersive learning. And so some of the things that they talk about and some of the ideas that they try and bring out are representational abstraction and interactivity. And so within representational abstraction, they talk about immersion and content. And within that interactivity, they talk about the notion of agency and feedback. And then from there, they transition into attention allocation, specifically as it relates to motivation, involvement, and usability. And the last part of their framework is they talk about the presence, the spatial presence especially, embodiment, enjoyment, novelty, and some of the other things that we have talked about. And what they say is collectively then that can lead to learning outcomes, most notably learner engagement. And again, I think this article is different because they talk about a unique technology, immersive learning. But this one stakes their claim that it can not only be better from a learning experience design, but it can actually improve learning outcomes. And they provide some framework and some literature to suggest why that might be the case.
Concluding this section is a chapter presenting an LX-focused workflow for the systematic design of physical, not digital, game-based learning interventions. Abbott's Intentional Learning Design for Educational Games, a workflow supporting novices and experts, synthesizes a set of LX design principles and links each principle to characteristics of game-based learning. The chapter then proposes a mapping of common weaknesses in game-based learning to potential LXD-informed improvements. Abbott further proposes a guided workflow for developing effective and learner-centered educational games consisting of 4 groups of overlapping design activities with various foci, including instructional design, empathy/emotional design, interaction design, and game design. Abbott elaborates on each step of this workflow with a design case. Applying LX design principles to a game design process ensures the connection between appropriate pedagogical foundations and the needs and desires of learners. Abbott's masterful ability to meaningfully situate LX within a multitude of complex and competing design processes is a particular highlight of this section. The chapter's focus on physical games provides a fresh perspective that even the most seasoned designer surely will appreciate.
I present today Chapter 12. Chapter 12 has a title, Integrating Learner and User Experience Design, a Bidirectional Approach, written by Rebecca Quintana, Stephanie Haley, Nathan Magyar, and Yuan-Ru Tan. Chapter 12 presents the author's vision for learning design as a bidirectional interplay between UX and LX designers. The authors foreground the complexities introduced to the design process as a result of conceiving the learners as users. A balance between UX and LX can be struck when designers consider operational tasks from the UX perspective and learning tasks from the LX perspective. The chapter presents 2 design cases that feature this approach to learning design with distinct contributions from both UX and LX perspectives. The first design case illustrates how UX designers took on a primary role with support from LX designers to identify learners' concerns, examine features from the perspective of learning tasks, and provide feedback on design outcomes at various stages. The second case demonstrates how a learning activity was designed and implemented by LX designers to guide instructors through the development of learner personas, a well-known approach within UX design processes. The authors conclude their chapter with helpful principles for guiding LX and UX collaborations. Their work illustrates A, how UX and LX can be combined synergistically, and B, it also serves as encouragement for learning designers who may be intimidated by the perhaps overwhelming breadth of knowledge, skills, and design subsumed in LX design. In summary, with careful planning, learning designers can work in tandem with UX designers to create effective and pleasing designs. Happy reading, everyone! Hello and welcome. From our edited book, Learner and User Experience Research, an introduction for the field of learning design and technology, I present today Chapter 13. Chapter 13 has the title Participatory Design and Co-Design, the Case of a MOOC on Public Innovation, written by Dorothy Cavignon-Bro and Denise Christol. Chapter 13 presents a case that applies participatory design and co-design methods to the design of a massive open online course, in short, MOOC. The authors detail how they implemented co-design across 3 stages of their timeline and participatory design in the 4th and final design stage prior to launch. Details are provided which focus on the activities conducted in each design stage, along with figures illustrating the deliverables created by the participants. The outcomes of the participatory design and co-design case are presented from 2 perspectives. One is the final production of the course, which is reported to have positively influenced the number of enrollments. Second, the other is the reflections on LX design as a professional development outcome of the design teams. By focusing on participatory design and co-design as potentially useful methods for instructional designers and user experience designers, these authors provide useful insights into methods that historically have been overlooked in the field of learning design and technologies. Happy reading, everyone!
Chapter 14 is entitled Supporting Equity in Schools Using Visual Learning Analytics to Understand Learners' Classroom Experiences. This is authored by a group of scholars out of the University of Colorado at Boulder, Ali Raza, William Pinuel, Jennifer Jacobs, and Tamara Sumner. The case presented by these authors serves as an application of UX design methods to the design of a visual learning analytics dashboard for teachers to promote equitable instruction at the classroom level. Couched in relevant literature, the authors provide justification for the use of data-driven decision-making in schools and how equitable instruction may be supported through 3 key constructs. Those are coherence, relevance, and contribution. The authors present a design conjecture that contends that learning analytic dashboards that embody these constructs could promote equity for diverse student populations by supporting teachers' data-driven decision-making. They then elaborate on how think aloud and cognitive interview methods supported their design of a learning analytic dashboard system. This work illustrates the application of established UX methods in the design of an instructional technology intended to enhance desired classroom experiences. This work contributes to our understanding of the multiplicity and complexity of LX, which extends beyond learners alone to be inclusive of instructors as well. This section and the book concludes with the chapter Think Aloud Observations to Improve Online Course Design, a case example and how-to guide by Greg, Reed, Aldemir, Gray, Frederick, and Garbrick. These authors present a case that uses Think Aloud observation methods to explore the perceived UX of online course designs within a learning management system. On the basis of Dewey's transactional theory of knowing, the authors present UX as the intersection of learner experience and pedagogical usability. In addition to the goal of making LMS courses easier to navigate, the authors also identify UX design principles and methods. The authors explain their design case with great detail using their data collection, data analysis, and findings. 5 design principles for maximizing the user experience of online courses offered within a learning management system are provided. 1. Avoid naming ambiguities. 2. Minimize multiple interfaces. 3. Design within the conventions of the learning management system. 4. Group related information together. And 5. Consider establishing consistent design standards throughout the university. Drawing from prior literature and self-reflections, the authors provide steps for others to conduct a Think Aloud study. Their work illustrates UX testing methods applied to learning design and contributes to our understanding of how to conduct a Think Aloud method to both enhance a learning design and contribute to the general knowledge base of the field.